Politico has published internal documents from the Capitol Police Force from the day before the Capitol riots. So these documents were from January 5th, where the Capitol Police actually laid out their strategy on how to, deal with what was supposed to happen on January 6th. And these documents show us that the Capitol Police are, for lack of a better phrase, completely incompetent. Because it turns out that the Capitol Police Force, at least the higher-ups, the ones who wrote the 17-page memo, they didn't think the people who ended up being the Capitol rioters, the Stop the Steal folks, they didn't think they were going to be the bad ones. No. They wanted to focus on the counter-protestors. The liberals. Those were the ones, these documents revealed, that police thought were going to storm the Capitol, hiding in shrubbery, it says at one point, trying to weave their way inside. Let me read a little bit of this. This is from Politico. One of the 5 mission objectives the document lists was to, quote, establish and maintain a fixed march route while excluding access to counter-protestors to minimize potential for violent interactions. That objective quickly dissolved as protesters overran police barricades and stormed the Capitol. Later, the document details further plans for dealing with anti-Trump protesters. Directly from the document, quote, counter-protestors will be expected to attempt to gain access by entering shrubbery and other natural fixtures. It is anticipated that a march will likely progress into the Capitol grounds and that Washington's Metropolitan Police Department would escort the marchers. So let me get this straight, Capitol Police. You were worried that liberal counter-protestors were going to storm the Capitol, and you arranged for a police escort to take the Stop the Steal people from the rally to the Capitol. And then, oh no, everything's gone haywire and they're attacking us. Oh, what do we do? I had a lot of sympathy for the Capitol police officers, especially the ones who came and testified in front of the January 6th committee. I watched those testimonies. They were heartbreaking. But kind of loses something, right? When you find out what was really going on behind the scenes. And I'll tell you this, though. I'll give you this much. It wasn't necessarily the police on the ground, okay? They were not the ones who made these decisions. They were not the ones who drafted this memo. This comes from the higher-ups in that police department. And every single one of them, any of them who either drafted this memo, worked on it, or approved it, every one of them should be fired for gross incompetence. It is literally the job of the police officers to assess threats and assess violence, in addition to keeping people safe. And in all 3 of those areas, they failed on that day. And they didn't just fail, they failed spectacularly in a way that left multiple people dead. So again, sympathy for the officers on the ground, right? Sympathy for the ones who came and testified in front of the January 6th committee. But for the higher-ups, there needs to be answers. Okay, this is the kind of thing that the select committee needs to be calling the superiors up to testify about. How did you get it so wrong? There's even one part, I got to read this. This is absolutely insane. Direct quote from their memo. At this time, there are no specific known threats related to the joint session of Congress Electoral College vote certification. Swing and a miss, right, Capitol Police? There's no threats, nothing, except those counter-protesters. Oh, those darn liberals are going to be horrible for us. You blew it every step of the way. Everything you predicted in this memo was friggin' wrong. How can such incompetence be trusted to protect the Capitol, folks? These people need to be fired, but of course not until they testify in front of that committee and explain why they thought the counter-protesters were going to be a bigger threat, even though we had already seen threats. I mean, hell, we were doing videos about the potential threats that were coming based on what conservatives were posting on social media. Everybody knew something was going to happen. Hell, there were even some people who were arrested after they landed in Washington, D.C. because of the threats they had posted on social media. Everybody knew the threats were coming. Everybody knew. Except apparently for the Capitol Police. And that's a crock of crap.